Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all here tonight. I really appreciate you all coming in. I have heard that there are people from all over the world here to learn about trauma, here to learn about how you may be reacting to everything that you've experienced last year, this year, and perhaps in your whole life. So I want to give a little introduction for those of you who might know a little bit about me, but might not know some things that are pretty important. I want to start off by saying that my name is Courtney, and I'm a human being, just like you are a human being. And I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also a doctorate in clinical psychology, and a mom, and a wife, and a daughter, and a sister. And I'm sure that many of you can relate to some of those labels: being a mom, being a parent, being a child, being a sibling, and being a human being that has possibly struggled. There weren't too many details for you guys in terms of what this event was going to look like exactly. And I'm kind of happy about that because I want to roll with you guys and have a conversation with you. I wish that this could be in person. I wish I could meet each of you individually. And the hope is that we will get there one day after this whole pandemic has ended. I can't see the chat box. And so if there is any love coming into it, thank you so much. As a human being who has struggled with a significant amount of trauma and anxiety in my life, if you are someone that has experienced trauma and anxiety in your life and you are giving love to another person, that person being me or that person being anyone else, then bravo for your ability to still feel compassion and connection with other humans. And congratulations on deciding to be here today to learn about yourself, to learn about trauma, to learn about what it means to be a human being in this world that we live in. So my name is Dr. Courtney Tracy, and people just call me Courtney outside of social media. And I have a license to treat people's minds, people like you, people like me. I started the Truth Doctor because I believe that each of you, every single one of you listening right now and watching this live stream, has a truth within you that's been covered up by what you've experienced in life. And if anything, I think that my content has more than likely resonated with you because you have a lot of questions about how you ended up where you are today, how the world ended up where it did today, and what you can do about it. How can you feel better? How can you be the person that you want to be and live the life that you want to live? Those are the major questions of life, and trauma impedes those questions significantly. Many of us are traumatized without knowing it. And I think it's important to start off this event by talking about what trauma really is. Some of you probably don't have a definition of trauma that you've ever actually heard from someone that understands what it is. And maybe you have your own interpretation of trauma being something really catastrophic. But it's not just car accidents. It's not just having someone that you love passing away. It is those things, but it's not just those things. And that's part of what this event is about. What has been your response to this pandemic? What has been your response to politics in whatever country you're in? How has your level of feeling safe changed? And is that trauma or is that not trauma? My definition of trauma is a prolonged, pervasive response by your nervous system and a psychological response after something happens to you. And there's been a lot that's happened to us this year. And there's been a lot that's happened to you guys and happened to me over the whole course of our lives. So trauma is a prolonged and pervasive nervous system and psychological response to something that you have experienced in your life that's shifted your whole perspective on who you are and what the world has or does not have to offer. The root of the word trauma means to hurt or to wound. And that's really important for you guys to understand, because I think often we think of these major catastrophic events that we consider trauma, and we don't realize that the root of the word that we're using when we're describing these things that have happened to us, it simply means to be hurt or to be wounded. And to take that a little bit further, even if you dive deeper into the root of the word, it also means to rub or to turn that wound. And so it's not just that you may have experienced this thing in your life that you would consider something that hurt you or something that wounded you, but it's these hurts and these wounds. Do you feel like someone's rubbing on that wound, or your situation is still being rubbed, or there's something turning inside this part of you that's been in pain, this part of you that's been hurt? And so think about if you've ever had any experiences that you went through where you feel like your wound is still being rubbed. Things that you've been through that make you turn inside. That's what trauma means. It's not the knife itself that causes trauma. It's the unhealed wound that it creates. And that's an important analogy, an important metaphor, an important visualization. Trauma is not the knife. Trauma is the wound. Trauma is not the event that happened. Trauma is your response to it. So give yourself a moment. Think about if you have, or maybe you still are experiencing trauma based off of that definition. And let's take a moment of silence, just briefly, for everyone in this live and everyone around the world whose answer is yes to that question. Yes, I'm traumatized. And you likely are too. And that's probably what drew you into this event. And I'm really happy that you're here, because you're not alone. One of the questions that I get often is, what are the signs of trauma? There's a lot of them. And I'm going to go over them with you, because I think that it's important for you to know, for yourself and for people in your life and people that you may just pass by. And a lot of the signs that I'm going to go over with you today are definitely applicable in several other situations. You can experience some of these signs of trauma if you're not traumatized, but often they are a result of trauma if you use the definition that I use, that many, many licensed professionals and researchers are now using. So, what are the signs of trauma? To start off, let's talk about how trauma affects your physical body. I think we forget about our physical body a lot. Our body holds a memory of everything that has ever happened to us in our life. Our body keeps the score, if any of you have read that book by Bessel van der Kolk. And that book is going to be making an appearance towards the end of this event, so stay tuned. Your body, think about it. Let's take a car accident, for example. If someone gets into a severe car accident, we would say, okay, yeah, that can be traumatic. So what happens to the physical body? The physical body usually tenses up, maybe freezes to try to protect itself. And that's really as far as a description as I need to go for you to understand that. And of course, this was a physical situation with a car accident, but the body is impacted when you experience trauma. Here's another example that might not seem so easy to come to the mind. When you get yelled at, especially by somebody that you love, but in general, when you get yelled at, think about what happens in your body. It doesn't not change. It changes. Your heart starts beating faster. Maybe you start to feel sick to your stomach. Maybe you freeze. Maybe you run away. Maybe you yell back. Your body interacts with the world and with its insides and with your mind and with the things that you experience on a daily basis. Your body holds memories, emotional memories, cognitive memories, physical memories. So, of course, trauma is going to impact your body. So, what are the signs? Gastrointestinal issues. Does your stomach turn when something reminds you of something that hurt you? Do you have difficulty sleeping at night because of things that you remember or feelings of being unsafe? Do you get sick a lot? You know, trauma activates your nervous system. And each part of your nervous system is supposed to work together with these systems, with your GI system and the system that helps you sleep and your immune system to help you function in a healthy way. But trauma changes that. Trauma changes the way that your body works because after you've been through trauma, which we'll get into what might have been traumatic for you last year, this year, or ever in your life, but primarily focusing on the pandemic, politics, the world, the things that have happened. It changes you. It changes your body. So if you were happy-go-lucky and healthy and had great connections with the people that you had relationships with and were respected and cared about yourself and had the basic things that you need to survive in your life, your body would function very differently than if you've experienced trauma. So those are some ways that you could have some physical reactions to experiencing trauma. Now, what about your emotions? What about what happens in your mind? Here are some of the feelings that you may experience if you've been traumatized before: anger, fear, sadness, shame, numbness, or feeling out of control. Two of the most important things to know about people that have been traumatized, or one thing to know about people and their response to trauma when it's happening, but mostly after it's happened. So something for you to consider for yourself is usually people that are traumatized will be numb or they'll be out of control. So they're going to feel too little or they're going to feel too much. So think about that for yourself right now. Do you feel too little or do you feel too much? And one of the solutions to that is if you don't feel enough, then let's say that you were about to enter into trauma therapy, you don't feel enough, you're numb. That was your escape. That was your safety. That's how your body and your mind took care of you. And the goal would be to help you to feel more, not to help you to feel more pain or to feel more trauma, to help you feel more joy. Because when our body and our mind protects us, when we've been traumatized, and it eliminates our ability to connect with the dangerous emotions that we're trying to avoid, it also prevents us from feeling the good ones too. And then the opposite can happen. We can feel perhaps out of control. Too many emotions are going on right now. Your anxiety is too high. Maybe you become too impulsive. Maybe you want the thrill because then you're in control of chaotic moments in your life. And that's different from the chaotic moments that you weren't in control of. So physical responses, emotional and psychological responses, and cognitive responses, thoughts. How does trauma affect your thoughts? And I'm sure that some of you are probably thinking, well, a lot. All I do is think about my trauma. All I do is think about the difference that this trauma made me feel about myself and the world around me. And so some cognitive effects of trauma are that you can have negative thoughts about yourself and about the world, and you can have racing thoughts where you feel like you just can't get away from your mind, and you can have cognitive errors. And this is a big one. This has a lot to do with trauma triggers. Cognitive error. Thinking that someone's going to hurt you when they're not. Thinking that something is going to hurt you when it's not. But your body and your mind, they really want to know that it's not. And so instead of taking the time to assess unconsciously, is this thing going to hurt me or not? Your body and your mind say, it is going to hurt you. So many things have hurt you in your life before. So just avoid it, run away from it, or attack it. Cognitive errors. They're not our fault. They happen because something happened to us. We can have triggers. We can have flashbacks. We can have excessive guilt about not being able to live a normal life because so much has happened to us and we wish we could just be normal. And intrusive thoughts based off of the events that happened or fueling from there in some way. So, how do we mask our traumas? How do we tell ourselves, like, what does it look like when we tell ourselves, I haven't been traumatized, I'm fine? You know, what behaviors do we do to mask that? We overwork. That's me. We use substances. We disconnect from all of the people around us. We compulsively eat. We undereat. We engage in high risk behaviors and aggressiveness. And sometimes we reenact our trauma. And that's something that I'm concerned about for everyone through this pandemic. We've all been forced to socially isolate. And perhaps we've forgotten who we are. Perhaps we've forgotten what the world used to be like, what our relationships used to be like. And my concern is that when this is over, we're still going to want to isolate. This social isolation has been traumatic. And it makes me emotional to think about it because I don't want you guys to stay traumatized after this is over. I don't want you guys to engage in the behavior of reenacting your trauma after it's over. And it happens so often. So often. We get into relationships that can be abusive. If we've been abused when we were younger, we can get into codependent relationships. We can sulk and let other people take control. These are really important things to understand when it comes to trauma and what it can look like for you. So think about it. Over this last, let's say 15 months, what have some of your responses been? And this is for you to consider, have I been traumatized by everything that's happened? And we're going to get into it a little bit more, but are you having sleep issues? Are you having appetite issues? Are you numbing? Are you lashing out? What does it look like for you? Because so many people have ended their relationships over the last 15 months. And of course, there's a lot of people that end their relationships all the time, but that's something that's been significantly standing out to me over the last 15 months is a lot of people are ending their relationships. And what comes up for me is, I wonder if it's just because they don't understand that they're in an active trauma. No one knows how to handle what has been happening. It's not your responsibility to know how. There's no rule book. There's no handbook. But I'm glad that you're here because that means that you want to know. Here are what some resilient responses would look like to trauma. And I'm not bringing these up to make you feel like, oh, I should be responding like that. I want to bring these up to you guys so that when this trauma is over, this trauma that we're in right now, you can have an understanding of when your resilience starts to kick in, when you start to gain an ability to take a deep breath, accept that it's over and that everything is different. That's a huge part of trauma. It happened. It happened. And we can't change that it happened. And that's not in our control. But what will be in our control is, what do we do when it's over? And so some of the things are increasing your sense of purpose and meaning. You've been contained for a really long time through this pandemic, and perhaps your purpose and meaning has sort of gone to the wayside. You can find yourself again in a different way. Maybe you have developed a commitment to a personal mission, knowing and seeing all of these things that have happened that have been out of your control and feeling like, I really want some change. So maybe you commit to a personal mission of change, either in your own life, in your family's life, in your community's life, in the country that you live in's life, or in the world. Maybe you revise your priorities, which is a very interesting thing to discuss, which you guys will be learning a lot about some choices that I've made over this pandemic in terms of revised priorities. So maybe you're thinking, it's not necessary to go to the office 5 days a week, or it's not necessary to go to these family events when they're triggering to me. And maybe you've learned some things about what's really important to you after this. And that can happen from trauma. That's a very resilient response to trauma. And so I pray and I hope that those things will come to you. I hope you'll feel this sense of resilience because you really deserve to. in this lifetime. It makes me emotional when I think about how much you guys deserve and how traumatized you really might be, because we really are all so traumatized. It's like I smile and say it in sort of a laughing way because it's honestly like astounding what this world can do to us. And this year really magnified that. And I think that's why you're here. Now, this event is about trauma, and we are in February, and February is Black History Month. And I think that it would be a disservice to not mention that. And we can't talk about trauma in America, and that's where I am, without talking about the fact that this month is Black History Month. And there's just, I think it's important to recognize and to point out a few things about how the history has affected people in a traumatic way, has affected Black people in a traumatic way. During the transatlantic slave trade, millions of African slaves were shipped all over the world to different countries, and mainly they were fertile aged women and young men. What does this mean? Why is this being brought up in a trauma event? Because this affected the entire existence of Africans on every country and every family. They were removed. They lost their opportunity to create a family. It's disconnection. Part of this event is called the psychology of disconnection. They were disconnected. And many other things happened to them as well. And Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat. And that can be traumatizing to the Black community because that's not the truth. It can be really traumatizing when masses of people say things about your community and your people, and it's not the truth. That would probably hurt you too. There's lots of things that have happened to the Black community, and I couldn't, there's so much more. There's so much more. But I didn't feel like I could move forward with this event without saying that there are lots of ways that the Black community has been traumatized, that any marginalized community has been traumatized, and it felt important to take time to mention that. Human beings are traumatized when they are exposed to situations both internally and externally that significantly expose them to, again, the definition that I have of trauma, which is prolonged and pervasive, an experience of a rubbed wound, of a turning hurt that hasn't repaired itself, that's still happening. So I needed to say something about it. Now, in order for us to truly begin to understand the history that goes into every single one of us and into each of us individually, we have to understand our history, and we have to understand the true history of everyone around us. The best relationships that you can ever have are when you fully understand the other person and the other person fully understands you. And whether you know it or not, we are all in a relationship with each other. And that's why knowing the true history of everyone that you'll ever meet and of everyone that's on this planet right now really matters. There's so much misinformation about absolutely everything. And I want you to, about yourself too, about what people think about you and about what you think about yourself. And it's all trauma. Give yourself permission to learn the truth about you and the world that you live in. There's a reason why so much of this last year has been belief and body and mind absolutely shattering. We have been in a pandemic, okay? A pandemic. We have experienced trauma and grief and loss and fear and anger and isolation, and it's happened because of this pandemic. And there's been growth. People have been resilient. And if you don't feel like one of those resilient people right now, then like I said, I hope that you do soon. I really hope that you do soon. We have been watching people all over the world die. That is traumatic. So if you can't sleep at night, if you don't feel safe, there's nothing wrong with you. It's normal. The social isolation that we've been experiencing is massive, and this affects our sense of safety. We are connective beings. You are not strange. Nothing is wrong with you. We need and we want to connect with other people. Even if we've had anxieties before this pandemic, even if we were isolating before this pandemic, when it becomes not our choice, anyone that has a mental disorder, it feels like it's not your choice what's happening. And if you are suffering with a mental disorder, what's happening inside your body and what's happening outside in the world, maybe it feels like it was just way too much. It's still way too much. This event is supposed to normalize what you're feeling. And I hope that it has, and I hope that it will continue to as it progresses. There's nothing wrong with you. If you've been experiencing the symptoms that I mentioned in the beginning of this event, it may be because of this pandemic. It may be, and that's really important for you to recognize so that you don't lose faith in yourself, lose faith in humanity, and lose faith in the systems that are supposed to protect us, like all of our political systems. There's trauma on both sides of the political system and all around the world in every single political system on the globe. We could all really use some help right now when it comes to navigating this, and that's the point of this event. So why has all of this fighting, all of this uprising, which for the most part has been good? There's been a purpose, a reconnective purpose, and understanding a unification. But why has it all felt so traumatic? Why has it all felt so goddamn overwhelming? We have to go back to the definition of trauma. Did the events of politics around the world and the system breakdowns that we've been seeing leave you with the question of what the hell is going on? Do you still feel like something's going to happen? Are you avoiding people, places, or things that remind you of what happened? You know, that's a symptom of PTSD. And this is not to have you self-diagnose yourself, but that's a symptom of it. Avoiding people, places, and things that remind you of the trauma. Have you dissociated from reality because it's just too much to handle? You turn off the news, it's on your phone. You turn off your phone, it's on the family conversations, from the pandemic to politics to losing your jobs to, I don't even know. The list is endless. And it feels like this, everything I'm saying is getting really heavy. And there's a part of me internally that's saying, lighten it up, Courtney. You're probably making people feel really sad. And I want you to take a moment to think, maybe you've been feeling the way that you're feeling right now for a long time, but you haven't actually sat in it for a moment. And so even if this is just acknowledging the pain that you've felt, which happens a lot in therapy, it can be a step forward. It can be you saying, oh, that's why I'm experiencing these things. That's why I have stomach issues. That's why I can't sleep. That's why I'm lashing out. That's why I'm drinking too much. That's why I'm falling down in my responsibilities and want to end my relationship. And I'm afraid of dying. And I'm afraid of going outside because of the color of my skin. Maybe there's lots of things that are going on in your mind depending upon who you are and where you live. This event is to normalize that. I hope that something's resonated with you so far. It's really important. I follow the humanistic perspective when it comes to treating people. And, you know, a lot of therapists will attach to an intervention or two or a theory or two. And I'm very open about human beings, but I do believe that we have needs. And so I talked a lot about what trauma is and what some of the symptoms are and how these things could be affecting us so much. And I'm sure that you're all here because you want to know, okay, so I get it. I'm probably traumatized from everything that has happened. What do I do about it? And that makes me excited that you're here. We have 5 levels of needs, and a lot of people can categorize these needs in different ways. And I don't adhere to these categories, but they're categorized pretty well in my opinion. And I want to start with the first one. I want you to check in with yourself when it comes to your physiological needs. How have you been taking care of your body since everything's been happening? Are you drinking enough water? What are you eating? How much are you sleeping? What type of clothes are you wearing? Are you still wearing professional clothes that are uncomfortable even when you work from home? Where's your grace? Where's your space? Are you allowing yourself to be comfortable? Do you put on jackets when you're warm or take off articles of clothing when you're hot? That's a huge part of trauma is we're disconnected from our body. And when we have to go to the bathroom, we don't. And when we need to eat something, we don't. And when we need to drink water, we don't. And when we need to take our medications, we don't because we are disconnected. That's part of the psychology of disconnection is we are disconnected, our mind and our body, or our mind and our body and to the people outside of us, or the people outside of us to our mind. It can get so messy and we can forget to take care of ourselves. So I really want you to ask yourself how you've been taking care of your body. Because that is a way to fight off these traumatic responses. That's a way for you to not allow yourself to hide away and be significantly altered by the events that have taken place over the last 15 months or over anything that's happened in your life. Deep breaths from your belly to activate the vagus nerve. Try taking a deep breath. Try drinking some water. Try eating something that you know your body's going to appreciate. Try going to bed a little earlier. And for those of you that are awake right now on the other side of the world based on the time zone, then I would say that this is an okay exception because you are working on your trauma by listening to this. But maybe get some good sleep afterwards. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself physiologically. You will die earlier if you don't. You need your body to live, and your body needs you to live. You have to start taking care of it. You have to. Now, what's another one of our needs? Safety and security, right? We need to know that we have the ability, we need to know that we have security to get those basic things that we need, to get water, to get food, to be able to sleep, to have a roof over our head. Are those things secure? And do we feel safe? And that's a huge part of why everything that's been taking place could be traumatic. Maybe you don't feel secure. Maybe you lost your job and you're afraid of being able to take care of your physiology and the physiology of the ones that you love by putting food on the table, having a roof over your head. Maybe you don't feel safe because you have health anxiety and we're in a pandemic. Maybe you don't feel safe because you are significantly affected by the systematic situations that are going on in the world and the systemic inequality seen all over the world. So what do you do if that's part of your traumatic response and you are feeling unsafe and feeling like you don't have the security that you need? You learn what you can and what you can't control. And that's something that's said a lot in the addiction community. And that's something that's said a lot by human beings who have accepted what they can and cannot control. And so often, part of a trauma response is to still wish that you could control something that you can't. And you ruminate over and over and over again. You just think about it, how it could be different, how it could have been better, how people's lives could have been saved by everything that I'm talking about if things were different. So what do? You accept the things that you can't control, and then you figure out what you can. Sometimes when the world around us seems so unsafe, all we need to do is go like this. And that sounds like, oh, there's just this therapist that's on a YouTube live right now saying, just hug yourself. That's not what I mean. I mean, protecting yourself. Knowing that you have yourself. Because once you know that you have yourself, then you can help another person feel safe. Maybe you need to take something with you that makes you feel safe. Maybe you need to quit your job if it feels super insecure and unsecure. Think about ways that you can take care of your safety and make yourself feel secure. Maybe it's looking at budgeting. Maybe it's like super surface level, like a pen and a piece of paper to say, I don't know if I'm going to lose my job or not. I don't know when this pandemic is going to end. So Take what you can that's in your control. You can't control if this pandemic is going to end. There's a bunch of shit going on. We have no idea. So what can you do? You can protect yourself by following whatever guidelines are in your country to keep yourself safe. Security, look at the resources that you do have and see what you need to do to get them to a place where you just can sleep at night. And if you can't sleep at night, then it's starting with the physiology, taking a hot shower, taking your medication, eating a good meal. There are simple ways to take care of yourself when you've been traumatized, but trauma will help you prevent that from happening. Trauma will tell you that something is always wrong. And it's up to you to tell yourself that not everything is wrong. Some things are still in your control. There's some things that you can change, that you can do something about. So take care of your physiology. Make yourself feel as safe as you can. Now, what's another need? Connection. I said earlier that we are connective beings. We want to belong and we want to be loved. And we all have different love languages. And sometimes it's touch. Sometimes it's being together with your family and hugging them. And maybe that hasn't happened in a really long time because of the pandemic. Maybe you miss what life used to be like. Going out and hanging out with friends. Maybe the holidays were hard for you. Find ways that you can remind yourself that you are a lovable human being. You matter and you belong. And I know that it may not feel like that, but you do. And the reason why I feel so confident saying that in the way that I do is because I understand. I feel like I say that a lot, but I understand what it feels like to feel unlovable and to feel disconnected and to feel so far away from what your life used to be like and to feel like there's no way out. But that's not true. And as the truth doctor, you can love yourself and make other people love you by being you, your real authentic self. And maybe you feel really far away from that person right now, but that person is still there. And so find ways that you can show yourself and show the people that you love them. When was the last time that you actually did something where you felt like you were acknowledging that you love yourself? When was the last time that someone that you love in your family that you haven't seen in a really long time just reached out to you? When was the last time that you asked them to because you told them that you were struggling? Are you keeping your struggle internal? Are you being honest with the people around you about what it is that you need? Because whether they know it or not, and whether you know it or not, again, we are connective beings. It's very important that we feel seen. And I hope that I'm helping you feel seen during this event. Find things that you can do. Write affirmations. Sounds so terrible. Make sure they're believable, not just some fluffy thing that someone told you to write down somewhere. What do you actually believe? And remind yourself of that. Not what trauma has made you believe. There's an important differentiation there. Think about it. How can you show yourself that you matter? How can you be affirmed that you matter from other people? And so often, you guys, trauma tells us, if I was lovable, they would just show me. But how many times have you loved someone and you haven't been able to show them because you're so overwhelmed with whatever else is going on in your life? Does that mean that you didn't love that person? No. It meant you were going in your own direction and dealing with something on your own. And maybe that's what's going on for them. And maybe all you guys really need is each other. So I encourage you to try to be honest. I encourage you to reach out and I encourage you to find that connection, even through everything that's going on. Find the connection, find ways to take care of your body, find ways to take care of knowing that you matter. It's really important. Now, we didn't have a timeline for this live event. So I think I'm going to go for about an hour, and you guys are really important to me. And we're already about 40 minutes in. And so I feel like I've said a lot of information, and I'd love to hear some of your questions and provide you with some information that I may have left out because I'm a human being and I'm dealing with the same things that you are in regards to the pandemic, at least, and my own effects that have happened because of American politics, at least. And so I'm human too. And so I probably left out some stuff that you were hoping for. So let's hear what you have to say. And I'm here to answer questions for you for at least 15 minutes. And then I have something really exciting that I want to share with you that it can really help you. And these are things that have really helped me, and I'd like to give them away to someone in the audience. So after I answer you guys' questions, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I have my content team, my production team sending me some of your guys' questions since I can't see the chat. So here is the first one. What's the best next step for someone who thinks that they've experienced trauma? That's a great question. And that's definitely something I left out of this. So thank you for asking. So what do you do? Of course, I listed all of these things that you could do, and I couldn't get too technical because I don't know you. I don't know what your responses have been. So what do you do? I think you make a list. You make a list of how your body is responding to the trauma, how your mind is responding to the trauma, what behaviors you think are attached to the trauma, and anything else that you think is relevant in regards to the trauma. And so maybe it's the last 15 months, maybe it's something else that's happened to you in your life. And then you take that list, and my production team can send me another question if they'd like. Maybe you take that list and you call a therapist. And someone actually asked me this question, was like, therapists are really weird, and usually I always pick the wrong one. So can you do an interview process with the therapist? You can. And I think that that's really important. And here's what you do with that list before you just reach out to any therapist. You decide, and of course, this is you doing your own self-analysis, but in what area is my trauma affecting me the most? Often we have a lot of physical reactions that we're not really aware of, like sleep issues, stomach issues. But maybe what we focus on is that we get triggered a lot. Maybe we're focusing on the mind because we're in the mind, but maybe it's much more of a physical response. If your trauma, if the symptoms of the trauma are mostly physical, you feel debilitated by them, it's affecting you physiologically, then I would suggest that you look for a somatic therapist. Somatic therapy. Soma means body. And so what this therapist is going to do is this somatic experiencing therapist, or another therapist that works with some somatic therapies, is going to understand how the trauma has affected your life and your body. And they're also going to be skilled at, once you have your body in your own control again, then they'll be able to help you with the trauma itself. Now, maybe, your body will be affected no matter what, but if the physical symptoms are not the most prominent, and maybe they're cognitive, so maybe you go see a cognitive therapist, or maybe you need to see a psychodynamic therapist because all of your traumas have been tied together for a really long time, and you need to dismantle them and see where the effects have been rooted so deeply into just your simple idea of yourself in the world. So it depends. And if you don't know, then I would start with a therapist that just focuses on trauma. And I would say, I have this list. They usually do 15 to 20 minute free consultations. And you say, I have this list. I went through this experience. And if you don't feel, and then see what they say back, and figure out what it is that you want in a therapist too. It's really important for you to do that, because sometimes we'll feel stuck in that relationship with that therapist, and we'll just stay with them for a long time because we're traumatized and we don't feel like we have a voice yet. And so it's going to be important to sort of just decide, like, what type of therapist you want. Are you anxious and you want a therapist that's going to talk most of the time in the beginning? Or do you have so much to say that you want a therapist that is more prone to listening in the beginning? And you can ask these questions. I've been through these traumas, or this past 15 months have been really difficult for me. Here are some of the symptoms that I'm experiencing. I'd really like to know after I just told you that, like, what you think the first 4 weeks would look like. How do you think that you could help me most? If you've ever had a therapist, have you ever asked them that question? How do you think you can help me most? I would love if someone asked me that as a therapist. So that's something to consider. Next question. Oh, I don't have another question. Will you send me another question? Just one moment. Oh, okay, here we go. Why do I feel, these are both good questions. Why do I feel like my trauma isn't real? Why do I feel like I just exaggerated it? Has it just become normal to me? Great question. So, our mind, there's depersonalization, there's derealization. These are forms of dissociation. Now, we all dissociate at some point in our life because it's just a way for our mind to like take a break when it knows how to do something, or it just needs to kind of like have an off switch for a little bit. But when you've experienced trauma, then maybe your mind dissociated. And it said, and this does not have to be active dissociation. This can just be you have literally dissociated yourself from the situation. You've detached from the emotions. Now, when you experience trauma, depending upon the type of trauma, but most traumas, the emotional part of your brain, depending upon your response, will shut off. And the memory of the trauma will split into a bunch of different aspects of it. So, like, when we experience something, the memory doesn't go through our eyes and store as a perfect reel in our brain. We have all of these different experiences. We have the experience of our body, the experience of what we see, of what we smell, of what we hear, of what we taste, of what we hoped for, of what we were afraid of all of our internal responses to it. And they can all end up detached, because all your mind wants to focus on is, what do I need to do to be safe in this moment? And it just goes straight to the survival part of your brain. And it says, you need to beat my heart faster, and you need to help me breathe faster, and you need to shut down my ability to think about anything else or feel anything else right now, because it's too painful and too scary, and I need to escape or fight back, or I need to freeze. And so you become disconnected. And I hear that a lot of like, why am I disconnected? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, why is this my response? And I'm here to tell you that it's a human response. Your body is trying to protect you. Your mind is trying to protect you because it doesn't want you to experience harm. And that's the thing with a lot of trauma triggers, is like, your body and your mind are trying to remind you that they love you and they don't want something to happen to you again. And that makes me emotional again. Your mind and body are engaging in a trigger response because they don't want anything to happen to you again. Or they're so used to you having this same response because perhaps the traumas are, they've gone on for a long time, like this pandemic, opening and closing and opening and closing. And maybe you've had extended neglect or abuse or multiple difficult experiences. And so it depends on if your body's used to having these responses, then it's going to continue to shut down and protect you. And so let me look at the question again. Why do I feel like my trauma isn't real? Because there's a part of us in our brain that makes it feel like it happened to us. And when we've been traumatized, it will say, don't worry about it. I've got it. And so it will make it feel like it happened to someone else, or it'll make it feel or look and seem like, oh, I just watched that like it was a movie. It's normal. It's something that's going on in your brain. It's called dissociation. More than likely, I don't know for sure because I don't know your exact situation, but that would be my overall response to it. It may have become normal to you, feeling this sense of trauma, feeling this sense of chaos, perhaps being uncomfortable is comfortable and being comfortable is uncomfortable. And you quickly find ways to feel comfortable again, which means that you find ways to be uncomfortable. Or maybe you have been so disconnected from the sense of comfort and joy that you don't know what it feels like anymore. Next question is, how can you reconnect with your body and mind? Good question. That's a great response. A great response to the response I just gave to that last question. This is important to me. You have to move your body intentionally. There's so many different ways that you can do that. Yoga is something that I actually just taught to my clients last night. Intentional movement is really important. Your body is doing a lot of things out of your control all the time. Your body is, in a way, sensing the world around you when you are not. And all the things that are going on internally are happening unconsciously. So when those unconscious reactions surface, and in a way your unconscious is showing, and that comes out in the things that you say, the things that you feel, and the things that you do. And so part of all of that is these body reactions. And so you have to get your body back in control. And that's one of the most important things. When you are engaging in mindful and intentional movements, you are connecting your body and your mind. When you are deep breathing as you are engaging in these intentional movements, that's not necessary to do as an intentional movement, but hey, if you like it, then do it. Any intentional movement. I promise you that as you start to move your body, you will start to feel in more control of your whole life. Because if you don't feel in control of your body, then you're not going to feel in control of your life or of your mind. So you use your mind, and a way that you quiet it down is by focusing on your breathing and breathing in your belly, because your belly is connected to a nerve like all of your other organs that are connected to your brain. And so you move. And you take deep breaths, and your mind pays attention to your breathing, which is happening in your body. And as you move your body, you are understanding that you are starting to feel calmer and more in control of your deep breathing. And it's connecting the control that you have over your body. So yoga, dancing, many different Eastern traditions of movement, singing, chanting, anything that's going to activate you internally, intentionally. Intentional internal activation. Intentional internal activation, and whatever that looks like for you. Sometimes when I'm like really overwhelmed, and you guys, I might be sitting here telling you all of this, but like just because I know it doesn't mean that I can just easily do it all of the time. Sometimes I wake up and I just immediately start having my heart racing. I immediately like go into anxiety, like deep physiological anxiety. And what I do is I sit up in my bed, and my husband's already down with my baby. And my baby's part of the reason why I wake up with this severe anxiety, because of trauma. And I just slowly move. And I take deep breaths. And I'm just sitting there in my bed like, I can't believe I have to do this when I wake up in the morning. And that's probably some things that you're going to feel too when you're trying to reconnect your mind and your body. Is you're going to think, I really wish I didn't have to even ask that question. And I really wish I didn't even have to engage in these things, because I wish my mind and body weren't so disconnected. But it can be that simple. And sometimes I only do it for like 2 minutes, and I take deep breaths, and then my heart slows down. And I get more in control of my breathing, and that quiets my mind. So intentional internal activation, in whatever way that looks like for you. If you Google "the body keeps the score, intentional movement," more than likely you're going to get a list of everything that Bessel van der Kolk suggests. So that's what I would suggest to connect your mind and body, is move your body and have your mind focus on those movements. That's going to be a huge step in the right direction. Let's see. Do you have any tips or techniques to use to help raise self-esteem? Well, self-esteem is important. It's actually a need of you being a human being. And I want to answer that through the lens of trauma. So trauma will make us question our abilities. Trauma can make us feel ashamed. It can make us feel embarrassed. It can make us feel out of control. It can make us feel disconnected. And that all of those things are going to lower our self-esteem. Why did that happen to me? Why didn't I do anything about it? Why am I acting like that person that hurt me now? Those questions are all going to affect your self-esteem. So what do you do about it? Well, first you have to figure out what are the thoughts that you actually have about yourself. And then I want you to write them down. Because even writing things down, it kind of takes the power away and doesn't feel so overwhelming in your mind. So write them down. What do you think about yourself? And maybe that's a difficult exercise. That's an exercise that we usually do in therapy. And so I recommend if you are going to list out all of the negative things that you think about yourself, that you make sure that you have an ability to keep yourself safe if you have a history of self-harm. Tell someone that you're doing that, or ask your partner to help you do that. So make the list. And then I want you to write down what events happened that made you think that. What events happened that made you think that? Because so I'm a doctoral level therapist, and I'm working on my own intervention, and I'm not going to say too much about it because no one does before they've had a published intervention. But for me, at least, it's been tracing. And that's what I'm suggesting to you guys right now, as briefly as I can say it, is once you have this list, just take one thought that lowers your self-esteem. And I want you to trace through your whole life why you may have had that thought. When's the first time? Because you weren't born with that thought, right? So what conditioned you to have that thought? And then I want you to think about other events that have happened after that secured that thought for you, that said, yes, this thought is right. And then I want you to realize, and this will take some internal work and some acceptance and some understanding and some perspective shifts, that it's probably not your thought. It's probably not your thought. And then decide, do you still want to think that? And what are the social constructs that make you think that about yourself? Like, I'm not man enough. I'm not feminine enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not compassionate enough. Whatever it is. What is the definition of that word even that you're not enough of? Where did that definition come from? Who defined it for you? Did you decide what your definition of smart was? Did you decide what your definition of attractive was and successful was? More than likely, if you haven't done work on your trauma, then you have not defined those for yourself. And other people and other situations are contributing to your low self-esteem. And so create a list and figure out where those thoughts came from. It's really important. And it's not just about changing those thoughts. And so that's something that I could easily say is, this thought leads to what feeling, that leads to what behavior, that then decreases, and the cycle. I understand the cycle, the cognitive behavioral therapy cycle. But where did the thought come from? Why is it there? Why is it in your life? Why is it making you feel so bad about yourself? And to realize that it's not your idea, it's not your thought. The entire concept, more than likely, that you're basing your low self-esteem off of doesn't really exist. But what does exist is you. You exist in your whole form, so worthy, so lovable, so unique. And it's these constructs and these thoughts from other people who are just as traumatized as we all are, deciding for you. And so it's important to realize. And once you realize all of those things, then you can say, okay, well, what do I want to believe? What is in my control? And none of that was in your control before you realized that it was happening, which happens when you trace backwards. It's not in your control to absorb things that no one actually informed you was happening. But if you trace and then you realize all the things I just said, then you realize that you are in control of what you think about yourself. You don't have to adhere to all of those things. No one told you that you had to. Maybe that could be a trauma. Maybe someone did tell you that you had to think these things and these definitions of success and attractiveness and being smart. But most of the time, we weren't told that we didn't have to listen to them, but we weren't told that we had to listen to them, but we weren't told that we didn't have to either. And so we did because everybody else was. So that's my own personal suggestion, is like create a list, track that, figure out where the hell these thoughts came from, break down the social constructs attached to them, and free yourself from, honestly, the nothingness that is this system that tells you who you are and who you should be and who you should love. Because you're a lot more than a cog in the system of this existence. I will answer one more question. I am an emotional person, and in this pandemic, I feel like I haven't processed it right. Could that be my body feeling numb to trauma? I am an emotional person, and in this pandemic, I feel like I haven't processed it right. Could that be my body feeling numb to trauma? It could be. I see that question as a two-parter. I think that if you're an emotional person, it actually might be more difficult for you to process this pandemic and this situation that we're in, because you may be feeling it all in a strange way. So much so that when we're feeling a lot, we shut down. And so then when the second part of the question was, could that be my body feeling numb to trauma? My mind went, okay, well, your brain is part of your body. And so the answer to that is yes. But then the body talks to the mind and the mind talks to the body. And I think it may be that it's so overwhelming that you're shutting down. Either your body's doing it or your mind is doing it, but you're shutting down. And it's not abnormal, right? Like, it may feel abnormal to not be processing everything that's happened, but it only feels abnormal because it's more normal to pretend like it hasn't bothered you. It's more normal to pretend like you aren't struggling and you aren't suffering, and to just go to work and have everything be okay. And like everybody's not, there aren't a bunch of people dying, and there aren't a bunch of people being treated unfairly, and there aren't a bunch of people like, it's unfortunately normal to pretend like you're okay. So the fact that you haven't processed it, that's the real normal. And yes, it could be your body shutting down, and it could be your mind shutting down your body, and your body shutting down your mind. And I really do think that more emotional people are more impacted by everything that's been going on, because we're susceptible. We're absorbing it. So that's a really great question. Now, we are over the hour, and if you enjoyed this live, then I would love, I don't know if I don't know if the live gets shared. This is the first time I've ever been live on YouTube, but I would love to know if you did enjoy it, if it helped you in any way. And because I can't see the comments, and because I don't know, there's something that I would like from you guys, and something that I would like to give one of you in return. So, well, this was in the way of what I was about to grab. I was feeling really nervous about talking to you guys today because I'm a human being, and I got this like freezing cold drink that I was going to like put on me if I needed to. I also ate really horrible pasta right before, and I felt so sick, but I came on here and I'm feeling better now. So I had to move that out of the way. So I thought I wouldn't make it awkward. Now, maybe that made it awkward. Now, this is super important to me. I have been the truth doctor for, what's really interesting is I've been the truth doctor like only in this pandemic. Like, I surfaced out of all of this to help you all. And one of the things that have helped me the most is learning about myself. And the way that I've learned about myself and gotten myself through this experience is I have read and learned about mental health and psychology. And of course, I have all of these degrees, but honestly, these degrees just help me do my job and do it right, and do it ethically and legally and morally and clinically, and really help people. My own self journey, which I infuse into my clinical work, has been reading books. There have been 5 books that have impacted my life significantly, and I would like to give away all 5 of those books to one of you right now. So for those of you that are still here, I want to show you which ones those are. First, do any of you guys know this book? The 4 Agreements. Trauma will make you take things personally when you shouldn't. Trauma. I still don't have these memorized. There's a few things in my life that I just can't memorize. Trauma will make you lie. Trauma will make you take things personally. Trauma will make you make a bunch of assumptions about whether or not the world is safe and whether or not you're a good person. And trauma can make you not do your best at times. These are the 4 agreements. They've changed my life. It's a very easy read. I'm not getting, like, I don't know what's it called, sponsored to say any of these things. This book has really helped me. The 4 agreements. Next. The body keeps the score. Brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma. This book is the answer to how to connect your body and your mind. This book is what to do if you feel disconnected, like you're not processing everything that's been happening in the pandemic correctly. This book is incredible, and it can be sort of triggering. I wasn't expecting it to be triggering. I had to read this book very slowly. I think it took me 4 months to read this book, and it doesn't take me that long to read most things, but this book changed my life more so than any other book I've ever read about trauma. So The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That's number 2. Number 3, The Untethered Soul. This isn't a book that therapists recommend that often, but I'm a spiritual person, and this book changed my life. The Untethered Soul is exactly what I'm talking about when I answered that question about how to work on your self-esteem. It's to untether yourself, untether your soul, untether your truth, which is something I talked about in the first episode of my podcast. Untether yourself from the trauma, from all of the things that have told you who you are and what you're supposed to do and who you're supposed to be and where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do with everything that you have. The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That's number 3. Number 4, Gabor Mate and the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. This book is about addiction, but it's more so about trauma. What Dr. Gabor says is, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. So if you're in pain, then you should read this book. In the Realm of Hungry Ghost references a Buddhist perspective of if you don't resolve what it is that you need to in your life, then you will roam around. And this isn't, he's not referencing the afterlife, but what he's saying is we're hungry ghosts on this planet. We're hungry for connection. We're hungry for the things that we never got. We're hungry for something that's going to cure our pain. And that's why people can become addicted. So if you know someone that's become addicted over this pandemic, if you know that you yourself have been engaging in some addictive behaviors, then read this book. And here's the last one. Be Here Now. This is by Ram Dass. He recently passed away. And this book, I ripped out all of the pages at my treatment center, and I ran a group therapy session, and we put all of these pages all over the walls of the entire lobby of that treatment center. This book changes your perspective, sort of like The Untethered Soul. And it looks really cool too. It's a very cool read. It's not like a normal book. So these 5 books are helped what made me, Courtney, Dr. Courtney Tracy, the Truth Doctor. And I want to give them away to someone in the audience right now who wants to have the knowledge that I have. This is part of where I got it from. You can't get a license from these, but I don't think you need one. I think you need healing. So since I can't see the comments, and I want to know if this was helpful, I want to know if you find me helpful in any way, then the only place that I know to actually leave reviews for myself right now, because I don't have like a Facebook page or anything like that, because that stuff's really complicated, I only have my podcast. And so I guess leave a review on there. I think that would be a great way for me to know if you're interested in getting these books so that you can work on your healing. And I'm going to buy them all new because we're in a pandemic and I've been touching them, and I don't know how else to get around that other than to buy new ones. So I'm going to buy new ones. I'm going to write you a message in every single one of them. A message of how it helped me and how I hope that it helps you. And maybe you read all 5 of them over 2021 because 2020 was a disaster, in my opinion. Or maybe you give them away to other people that you know need them based on what each of the books can help with. So I guess go to Apple Podcasts. I think that's the only place you can leave reviews, and let me know Let me know if I've helped you. Let me know if this helps you. And then what I'm going to do, because I don't think you guys can have your usernames. Like, I won't know if it's you. So what I'll do is I'll make an Instagram story as soon as I get off this live. And I'm going to put a little question box so you can type some stuff in. Let me know the username that you use to put in the review so that I know. And I will be shipping these to one of you. Because if you're in this event, then you may have experienced trauma. If you're in this event, then a pandemic affected you, then politics affected you, racial inequality affected you, and you deserve healing. And I'd like to help. So in close, like I always close everything, my name is Dr. Courtney Tracy. You guys know me on the internet as the Truth Doctor. And the truth is, the past 15 months have been so fucking traumatic, and you are not alone in your responses. And you deserve some healing. So I look forward to seeing how I've helped you, and I look forward to sending this to someone across the world. I don't care if it's international. I will send it to you because you deserve it. From one human being to another, congratulations on learning more about yourself today. Congratulations on wanting to heal even after everything that you've been through. I will see you soon. Bye.